Okay, so this is Kate Jennifer recording Andy Rowe in his house in Oxford on February the 3rd, 2026 for the Seen But Not Heard project. So Andy, start from the beginning. Where were you born, maybe?
In Hull, I'm not going to say the hospital. I think it's I can't remember the name of the big hospital now on Amniby Road.
Infirmary.
The Royal Infirmary. I was born there in '64, and my parents, my dad, funny enough, he was a fisherman. He was a trawlerman, and he was one of these trawlermen who went off to Iceland and those cold, awful places and risked his life catching fish. And so that was my dad's influence on me, fisherman. Okay, can you see all the fishing rods all everywhere? No, I don't like fishing, but ironically. My mum, she was born in Hull, so was my dad. And she was very clever when she was younger. She qualified for grammar school, and she looked like she was going to have an academic career. One of few people who went to grammar school from her class, but she didn't, because she got a job after school, I think, in working for the milk trade or something, and then she met my dad, who she thought looked like Elvis, and he did in a way. He had his quiff and whatnot, and so she got married and went on to become a housewife, a very good housewife. She brought up 4 children, including me. And so I lived in, by and large, East Hull, and Newbridge Road area was one of the first houses I lived in, and I'm trying to remember the name of the street. It'll come to me. Steenberg Street, 68 Steenberg Street. Very working class area. And we stayed there for a couple of years, and then we moved to further down, only a few streets down, a place called Saviour Street, which was, again, it was East Hull. And I spent my first 22 years, I think, living in East Hull, which was, how can I describe East Hull? It was not the sort of place I was ever really comfortable with. It was nice, friendly neighbours and everything, but there wasn't a bohemian type of set that I really sort of wanted to find. I think there was something in me that there was this creative part of me, or from a young age, that wanted to gravitate towards more interesting people other than the friends that I had. I had some great friends, don't get me wrong, but the sort of friends I had, we were just interested in, as I grew older, we were interested in cars. And I got interested in cars, did the car thing, smashed cars up, got into serious accidents. But there was always something other inside me, wanting more than just the car thing, the lads thing. And when I got to about 18, I think it was, I just gave up on the cars. I started taking magic mushrooms, and it completely turned my head inside out, like a glove being sort of turned inside out. And I was playing football as well at the time in a sort of men's league, very physical, brutal. And I started taking magic mushrooms, and suddenly I dropped everything. I dropped the football, I dropped the car thing. I just didn't want that anymore. I went through this personal revolution in my head of like, my God, what have I been doing? I've just been sleepwalking my way through life. And so at this point in time, this juncture in time, this almost epiphanic episode where I'm taking these magic mushrooms and whatnot. And I'm not saying the magic mushrooms did it for me, but I think the magic mushrooms they opened certain doors that were ajar anyway in my head, and it just helped move me on a bit and to go through these doors. And then I started dressing differently. All of a sudden, I started bleaching my hair and listening to different music. I mean, I was aware of punk music because my sister was a sort of punk in '78, and I must mention that fact that I have got a sister and two brothers, and I'll mention more about them. And so I became aware of, I think once the doors had sort of opened, so to speak, I'd remembered, I started going back to when I was 13 and remembering that my sister used to listen to John Peel on the radio, and I'd sit outside her room and I'd listen to John Peel, I'd listen to the X-Ray Specs and Susie and the Banshees, but I'd never let my sister know that I was listening to her music outside her door. I liked what she was playing. So all this was in my head. When I got to 18, I started thinking about that, and also at 13, I'd bought my first Teddy Boy bootlace tie, and I was really into Teddy Boys. I started going to little school clubs with my bootlace tie, and my friends who had their crate sole shoes and whatnot, and my intention was to become a Teddy Boy. But my dad, when he saw my bootlace tie, he threatened me. He said either that stays, he said either that goes or you do, meaning the bootlace tie. So he gave me choice to get rid of the bootlace tie or I have to go. Yeah. I thought this was brutal. I thought my dad would have liked the fact that I was getting into the Teddy Boy thing and the bootlace tie, because he was a bit of a, my dad used to have a quiff and all this and liked Elvis. I thought he would have liked that, and he didn't, and so I had to get rid of my bootlace tie, and that was the end of that rebellious period. And so all this is inside. As an 18-year-old, all this is, I've already done that. It's in me, but it was stopped at an early age. It was sort of put on hold. And I mean, just one more thing. As a 13-year-old, I was massively into Albert Finney, who was Saturday Night Sunday Morning, and he was this brilliant character, a rebel. He was a Teddy Boy in Saturday Night Sunday Morning, Arthur Seaton, and I was massively into Arthur Seaton when I was 13, the rebel. And my dad stopped all that. So when I got to 18, we'll come forward a bit, where I've just been taking these mushrooms. And I start thinking back to that period where I was a rebel to some degree, and I was enjoying it. And I tapped into that, so I started bleaching my hair and thinking, I can do this again. My dad stopped me doing that, developing into that Teddy Boy. But I started bleaching my hair and going to Spiders regularly, and I began making my own Teddy Boy jackets. I used to put all the coloured lapel things on. I buy a standard jacket from a charity shop, and I put the coloured lapels on and the little cuffs and everything, and it looked like a Teddy Boy jacket. And I started dressing like that. I bought myself some crate-sole shoes, and I started reliving. I started going back to that 13-year-old who was actually now. I was able to live that fantasy as an 18, 19-year-old or whatever. I could live it now because my dad wasn't there to tell me, because he'd left, and my dad left in 78 when they got divorced. So my dad wasn't there to tell me what to do. So I was living out this fantasy as a Teddy Boy, going to Spiders and whatnot, Silhouette Club. And so I'm at that point now. I'm at sort of 20, 21, whatever. And then something happened where I started going to the Silhouette Club regularly, and this only happened because my interest in the Silhouette Club began as a 14-year-old. Again, I'm sort of going backwards and forwards here, because I'm remembering things as I'm talking. When I was 14, I remember a conversation between my mum and my sister, Carol. Carol was one of the first people to go to the Silhouette Club, along with Roland Gift, they were big friends, a big group of them. And I remember one day, my sister had said she was going to the Silhouette Club one evening, and my mum piped up and said, "Oh my God, you're not going there, are you, that club?" And it was like, I was like really curious, what's going on here, what club? They had this argument. My mum, listen, but my mum was in no way anti-gay or anything like that. She just heard about the club. She thought it was notorious. The gay thing might have been, might have been something there with my mum, but it certainly had this element of notoriety about the club. And so they had this argument. Carol, my sister, wanted to go, repeatedly. And my mum was saying, "I don't like you going to this club, blah, blah, blah." But this argument happened a number of times when my mum found out that my sister had been going to the Silhouette Club. And as a 14-year-old, I was fascinated by this conversation, thinking, what is it about this club? Anyway, I didn't go to it until later on, until a teenager. I went the odd times, but I remember I had to go there because of the conversations my sister had with my mum. It just seemed like, wow. And not only that, there was a general consensus in Hull that this club was sort of underground. It was a place you shouldn't really go to. It wasn't for normal people. This was the general consensus. And the more people told me about this, the club was sort of blacklisted, however, by certain people. I just got more interested in it. And then one day as a 19-year-old, I went, I think I was 19 or 18, I was a teenager, and I went for the first time to the club with my friend. We it was quite nerve-wracking, to be honest with you, because as a non-gay, heterosexual man, I knew very little about gay people. I didn't know any gay people, any gay friends, or nobody would admit to me they were gay. All I knew of gay people was these stereotype cartoon versions on the telly, like John Inman, who was Mr. Humphreys in Are You Being Served? He was this very camp cartoon, over the top. I had him in my head as this is what gay people are like. Larry Grayson, who used to present the Generation Game. You had the Village People. So this was about some sort of total of what I knew of gay people. It's terrible, but I lived in East Hull. It was very working class. Gay people weren't on your list of, or high up on your list of conversation. It just wasn't. They were just people we didn't know, an alien, as you mentioned earlier on. So anyway, that's what I knew of gay people. So when I went to the club for the first time, and there were certain rumours about gay people, other than what I knew, these sort of camp versions of, oh, gay people, you don't want to be mixing with them. They're weird people, they're perverted and all this stuff. But it never, all of these negative pejorative terms never left a mark on me. I just thought, I'm going to find out for myself. Do you know what I mean? So I went there with my friend that night in 1983, and it was amazing. It was so amazing, because we went through the doors and we were confronted by a woman called Molly. She'd sit behind in this little cubby hole, and she had this raven black hair, like in a bob, and she had these very, very unorthodox teeth, and she had a very, very, very icy stare. I mean, she could stare at you and she'd penetrate your soul, and she'd try and catch you out. She'd try and work out whether you're suitable for this club. Because I remember first going as a nervous teenager, and I looked at her and I thought, she's not even speaking, she's just looking at me, and I was like, God, this club's weird. This club is weird. My first impression was, I've been really intimidated. That's what I felt like. And this was just at the door. I hadn't even been in the club. But anyway, once she'd approved of me, because she hadn't seen me before, so she probably was just testing the waters, you know what I mean. And she did the same with my friend Steve. And the first impression was, we went into the main part of the club, and you're confronted by, or we were confronted by this, it looked like a living room, a very big living room. It had this flock wallpaper, and lights on the wall, really fussy old-fashioned lights, lampshades, sort of fussy dangly bits off the light shades, bright red material, and the carpet was wickedly patterned, contrasted with the flat wallpaper, and then there's a television right, really in view, a big telly with seats around it, and it was just it was a living room. It was my God, what is all this talk of this club? And then I remember seeing lots of what I thought were older people in couples just sitting around, some watching the television, some just talking. And I thought I'd come to the wrong place, because these people, in my estimation, I was only a teenager, they looked like they were in the 60s. They might not have been, probably in the 40s. But I know a lot of older people did go upstairs, stay upstairs. I mean, people in the 60s did go there, but the people I saw probably weren't old, but they looked older. And they looked really serious, locked in conversations. And I felt very naive and, not very well prepared for this. And so we sort of hung about upstairs a little bit, just sort of checking it out and getting the vibe, And then there was a set of stairs that led downstairs into the dance floor area. And the dance floor area, you open this one door to go, only a tiny door to go into the dance floor area. Oh my God, wow, bang. Straight away there's this wave of energy of a packed dance floor, music blasting out, quite deafening, and the contrast, you could feel it's almost visceral, the feeling of energy downstairs, young people, and it's low ceiling. It's almost quite claustrophobic, but the contrast upstairs was just incredible, because the young kids downstairs, lots of serious people, intellectuals upstairs, and the people upstairs, by and large, they never ever, the older people, the older generation, they never ever went downstairs. They just stayed upstairs all night long, which was just amazing, because for me it smacked of being like two clubs in one, upstairs, downstairs. It really was like that. It was very unusual. I've never come across a club like it in my life. That division of or the separation between generations, it was remarkable. But saying that, I spent a lot of time upstairs watching the television, funny enough. I mean, you go out to a nightclub and you expect to be getting off your head somehow, but you end up, I remember watching a football match there in 1984. It was the semi-finals of the European Championships, I think, between France and Portugal. And I watched it and I'm thinking, what am I doing? One way I'm watching football, the next minute I'm downstairs, and it's just going mad on the dance floor. I thought, why? Well, I've never done this in any of the club that I know. But there was something really likable about doing that. Almost sitting in your own living room, having a little respite, and then going downstairs to this madness, and then it was this interchangeable sort of routine. So you get really hot on the dance floor, then you go upstairs and sit down and chill out and watch some TV, and then go back downstairs again, blah blah blah. And then, after noticing all the sort of visual, obvious architecture and whatnot, then I started noticing the clientele. And specifically, I was looking to spot gay people, because it's a gay club. I wanted to know what all this talk was about these people, all this section of society I didn't know anything about. And it wasn't obvious at first, because my impression was that everybody would have been like John Inman to some degree, making it very obvious that they were gay, but it wasn't like that. I think by and large, lots of gay men and women, they didn't dress like that, and I was, part of me was sort of surprised, and another part wasn't, because you should never really surrender to any rumours. And so I was slightly disappointed, because I thought, I'm going to be really intimidated tonight, because I know people are going to be, wafting around theatrically in their colourful attires, talking in some strange gay language. But it wasn't quite like that. So I wasn't quite sure what to make of it. But I was nervous all the way through, because I was young, and I'd heard all these rumours about the club, and I thought there must be more to it than people just fearful of gay people. There must be something else going on. That's what I thought. What am I meant to be looking for? And then I noticed people were sniffing poppers. You remember poppers? I don't know if you do. It was a thing you sniffed. It was in a little bottle, amyl nitrate, I think they called it, or whatever. And I noticed people doing that on the dance floor, and I didn't know what they were doing at first. I just saw people with little bottles. I thought, that's interesting. What the hell is that? And I only found out later on that it was sort of linked to the gay scene. But I did end up, having a few goes myself and just frying my brain for a bit. But it's not meant to be sniffed. As far as I was concerned, I later learned that you're not meant to sniff it. You're meant to just leave it, the top off the bottle, blah, blah, it relaxes you, etc., etc. And so there's these things going on, which are all alien to me, but also quite excitable. It's all new stuff, new experiences, and something to tell your mates about, that you've actually been to this club, And so that was sort of my first experience. Partly enjoyable and partly not. I was slightly disappointed that there wasn't more to it, more in terms of like being shocked. I don't think I got the shock factor that I was looking for. But then at the same time, it dispelled these silly rumours that this place is notorious and it's full of like mines, hidden mines and whatnot that detonate in front of you. But so that was my first experience, sort of ambivalent about it. And I didn't start going regularly until probably about a year later, maybe. 1984 was my big year, my favourite year. I really got into it. And the more I went, the more I did start to observe certain characters, certain camp characters, really camp characters, who would come out on a Saturday night and they would dress up, and they called themselves transvestites then. And there were some really obvious characters who dressed in men, I'm talking about here, by and large, who dressed in stilettos and frocks and bright red lipstick and wigs, and it was quite amazing standing next to them. Sometimes a bit intimidating to me because they're quite unpredictable, but really funny, ever so funny. But they for me, they would come out at the weekend. They had jobs in the week, and this was their chance at the weekend to dress up, fantasize being a woman. And it was very playful, very theatrical. And I just think, well, thank God this is their stage to do that. It was somewhere they could go and feel comfortable to reenact their fantasies. And I think we all do that. I was fantasizing I was playing out my fantasy as a teddy boy when I used to go to Spiders. I was dressed in my homemade teddy boy outfits. That was my fantasy. I didn't wear that throughout the week. I'd wear my Cripsall shoes, but that's as far as it went. So I was doing a similar thing to them. We were all sort of performing, putting on some persona. And so I got what they were doing, even though what they were doing, these sort of transvestites as they were then, what they were doing was not too far removed from what I was doing. We're all being a little bit, not quite ourselves, being somebody else. And I like that. I really like that about the club. I mean, because there's one thing about the club, was that for me, it was such an essential community hub. It was a place where lots of disparate people could find a centre of gravity, or just somewhere where they could all meet like-minded people to share similar views and thoughts and feelings. And it was that sort of place, because once you go to somewhere like that and you learn that there are other people who share the same values and thoughts and feelings as you, it makes you feel part of something bigger, and you're not alone. The world, you're not a freak, you're not different. There are lots of people like you, and places like the Silhouette up down the country, and it just doesn't just have to be a nightclub. It could be a bingo hall, or I don't know, a chess club. It's where people who've got individuals who are different and go somewhere and share their experiences of the people. These are so essential for social cohesion. Really essential. Social clubs for young lads and girls, are so essential, where people can meet up and form bonds and trust and confidence and go out as good human beings into society. And that's, for me, that's what the Silhouette Club was. It was a really great place where lots of creative people used to go and rub shoulders. And I've said it in my book that it was like a really, really fertile flower bed for young seedlings, such as Gary, who's in my book, to go along and blossom into confident people, and then go into the world and establish themselves and give off positive vibes and contribute. Without these places, these people might not have done that. They might have been isolated still and not found the confidence and become better human beings. And that's what I think the essential message of the Silhouette Club was, and clubs like it. They are breeding grounds for social cohesion to develop. And another thing about the club was, because it was officially a gay club, and there weren't any other places in Hull where, I think there were one or two pubs where gay people used to meet, but not officially a gay pub or whatever. But when that was official, it became official. It was like a metaphorical bomb shelter, in the sense that it was somewhere mainly gay people could go, and alternatives, and for a few hours you could let your hair down and be sheltered from the missiles of prejudice and hatred and all that. So, because there's no trouble in the club, trouble was kept at the door. The management had this strict policy of no townies, and what I mean by townies is people who would go to pubs such as the Hull Cheese, or I can't remember the names of some of the pubs now. Maybe the Trog Bar. I'm not so sure about the Trog Bar, but there were a few pubs where townies would go, and I mean by townies, people who just go out for drinking and trouble, and they were all kept outside, kept away from the Silhouette Club, and they did a brilliant job, the bouncers and the management, because there was trouble never came across that sort of. It never came through the door, wasn't allowed in, and it was nice to be in an environment where you knew there wasn't any tension or outsiders wanting to stir up trouble. That was a nice thing, and that's why those gay people who used to dress up very colourfully, they could do that confidently. There was nobody going to judge them, and that was the great thing about the Silhouette. People went there, they weren't going to judge anybody. Because if you weren't gay, you were an alternative. You were either a goth, a punk, a new romantic, or just somebody who thought differently, didn't just go along with conventional ways of thinking. And that was the general consensus. So people could flower in there, they could show off, they could be dramatic and theatrical and all that. It was brilliant. It was licensed to do it if you wanted to do that, and nobody cared. Nobody batted an eyelid, really. It was very odd place. Now all those disparate groups, I've mentioned the punks and the goths, and nobody clashed or anything. Everybody was just into the clothes and the music mainly, and just having a good time. So yeah, I mean, it was an unbelievable place, and weirdly, coincidentally, the club existed from 1979 to 1990, and that's the same period as Margaret Thatcher was in power. She won 3 successive elections, and that party, the Conservative at the time, was by and large, it was anti-gay, or that's the position it adopted to pander to its backwards looking, moral minded supporters. So they pandered to these people, and it was okay, I say okay, for gay people in the early 80s. It was as good as it was going to get, right? Until AIDS happened. This is my interpretation of events, by the way. I'm no historian on this. AIDS happened, and a number of gay people died because of AIDS-related diseases, HIV and all that. And so it became linked with the gay community, and of course the gutter press picked up on this, and as they do regularly, they made an issue and they created an enemy out of gay people, persona non grata because of AIDS, And I think I read a survey back in the 80s, a survey that was carried out, and it was something like 75% of the general public considered gay people a threat. And then, I mean, that's, this was down to a lot of the gutter press playing on this. They like to create enemies because it sells newspapers to people who like having enemies. Simple as that. And then something else happened, and I think this is 1981. A book was published in Denmark. It was called Jenny Lives with Eric and Martin, and it was a book about Jenny was a young lass. I think she was about 7 years old, and her dad was Martin, who was divorced, but Martin's boyfriend Eric moved in, and Martin and Eric looked after Jenny. It's a picture book, and it was created to sort of dispel any anti-gay prejudices. And this was released in Denmark, and for a couple of years, I mean, nobody batted an eyelid in Denmark about this book, but I think it was released in Britain in about 83. And it happened that a library in a school in a Labour-run council stocked this book, and the Sun newspaper, the Sun again, it ran a story about they found out about this book in the library in the school, and they ran a story saying this book was evil, and it caused outrage. And there's a woman, an MP called Baroness Knight. She was an MP for Birmingham. She was all about family, traditional family. She was a Conservative, absolute staunch traditional Conservative, who believed the family unit should comprise a mum and a dad, and the mum stays at home and the dad goes out and earns a living, whatever. So this woman, Baroness Knight, picks up on this book, and she's outraged by it because she thinks it's going to be a threat to the traditional family unit, to gay people looking after children, well, that's just not acceptable. So she started going around schools telling pupils about this book, and how homosexuality was outrageous and nasty and all the rest of it. And so she went on this mission to try and stop this book being circulated. And then she began lobbying the Conservative government about this book, and also to try and stop the publication of any gay media in schools, to stop gay publications being spread throughout schools or other council sort of buildings and whatnot. And she pushed and pushed, and eventually the Conservative government went along with her idea that they've got to prohibit any gay publications spreading, in schools and council buildings. So they introduced Section 28 or Clause 28 in 1988, I think it was, which did prohibit the publication of gay material or the spread of gay material in schools, etc. And this was state-sponsored homophobia. I mean, this is unheard of. This is like the first anti-gay law in about 100 years. This is something that authoritarian regimes do. They pick on a minority and they demean them, they belittle them, they make them less than human so people can pick on them. But of course that suits governments because it creates divide and rule and makes ruling easier. It's an old tactic. But Clause 28, I mean, gay people's lives weren't hard enough before that because of AIDS, etc., and other crap that newspapers have been spreading. But it was even harder because it was official now, because gay people were the enemy. They were persona non grata because of this stupid Clause 28. And all this was going on, during the time of the Silhouette. Well, I was aware of AIDS when I went there, but it didn't put me off. Again, you'd think it was all over the place. It was on the telly advertisements, people dying, always wear a condom. They were saying to men, it was scary because it was like the pandemic recently in 2020. We didn't know anything about it. It was all new territory. And it didn't stop me going to the club, but I was aware of it because I wasn't sure whether you could get it from phlegm, from glasses, But for some reason I carried on. I just thought, sod this. I want a good time, I want a good time. I don't want... It was never proven that you could catch it any other way, other than having sex. And I thought, I'm not gay. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to get it, because I could sleep with somebody who's bisexual. So I was aware of that, and I was aware of it, believe me. And so that was in the back of my head, and then there, of course, there was other things, the dislike of gay people and by non-gays. And I was also aware that through association with that gay club, the Silhouette Club, I think by law, if you supported gay issues, if you're heterosexual, if you supported gay issues, you were also put under scrutiny. But you know what? I liked that. I loved it. I loved the fact that the more outrageous, or the more... I didn't like it for gay people, but the more gay people were denigrated by the press or prejudiced people, I sort of liked it. Because just by going to the club, I was associated with notoriety. And I'm like, well, what's not to like about that when you're young? So I sort of liked that, and I thought it really made me fall in line with what gay people were thinking, in opposing Section 28 and whatnot. I was on their side. Because I felt, to some degree, as a minority, I felt like an outsider. I used to dress differently. I never went along with conventional views. I never voted for the same parties that my family had for generations. I went against that. So I knew I knew I was a black sheep somewhere. I know that I for want of a better term, I felt like a black sheep in loads of instances. So I knew what it felt like to be an outsider. I didn't know what it felt like to be a gay person. I'll never experience that because there's horrible prejudice that I would never experience. But I knew what it felt like to be an outsider, which gay people were at that time, and I'm sure they still are to a degree now. So there were these parallels which made me fall in line with what gay people were fighting against, all these laws and whatnot and prejudices, and so I kind of like that. I mean, also there was resistance. Moving on a bit, there was resistance to Clause 28. Lots of opposition groups started, and I think those opposition groups that were reaction to these laws, these pernicious laws, I think that's where the seeds or the genesis of the LGBTQ movement started, right there, right after Clause 28. I think it started there and then, and that was happening in the club at the time. You know, little inklings, little clues of resistance or change. So the club wasn't particularly political, and my book isn't particularly political. I didn't want to make it. I could easily have made my Silhouette Club book a political book, or more political, because it was a very political time and politics had a big effect on the gay community. But I wanted it to be about stories and personal stories and experiences, just as life, you know, in the club and as a gay person or an heterosexual person who used to go there, an outsider, should I say, who belonged to some tribe or other. I wanted it to be about their stories, and not, if people wanted to mention the politics, that I wanted to leave that to them. I could have easily written a few pages about Thatcher and the successive Thatcher governments and how it had an effect on the gay community. I didn't really want to do that. I didn't want to turn it into some manifesto or whatever, you know, political manifesto. I wanted it to be a book of stories, and those stories are left to people to tell of their own. So, I mean, there are mentions of Thatcher and AIDS and the crap that people had to face as gay people back then. So there are those inferences or links to those sort of feelings and whatnot. But yeah, I could have gone more into the politics, but mainly it's about stories. And in the end, I think when I look back at that time, and I don't know how the likes of Gary Rose or a number of other gay people who went there, when they look back at the time of the club and that period in general, I think they will remember the fun times more than the crappy times in life. I think that's what you want to do when you reflect on your life. I think try and look at all the positives and the good experiences and the madness, rather than all the other crap, because most of the time you've got slightly more control over the fun and the madness. You can create those things, whereas the crap comes from other people, and you can't really control that. You can deflect it and just forget about it, but you can make those fun experiences, and I think that's, in the end, that's what we want. We want fun, we want laughter, we want friendship, and a message of minorities can defeat the majority in some ways, or the majority that's I mean that in a sense where the people on the fringes have got more power than they think. If you get together, you can be a big voice against a very loud voice. You can create pinpricks. You can create them. You can cause ripples you can be cleverer. I think the majority of people are easily fooled and foolish at times, and that will always be the case. And I think the minority are always cleverer and stronger. And it's like a dam. You can put one tiny crack in that dam, and you can break it through cleverness and belief and strength and all that. I think I'm just waffling. I don't know. Is it of interest?
Of course, it's fascinating. I wonder if you'd speak more about getting to the club. Were you a student? And then the physical geography, like did you visit other clubs, bars?
I'll do that. Yeah, it's hard to pack everything in one go, isn't it? To do it in a linear fashion. Like I started off with my family, and I didn't mention my brothers and my sister at first, but they played a role in my life, especially my sister, because she was an early punk, and her music tastes back in 1978 when she really started becoming more alternative, and she got into John Peel, Susie the Banshees, X-Ray Specs, the Cramps, Velvet Underground, and she started going out with a boyfriend in 1979 who'd been to see the original Sex Pistols, and his music taste was so eclectic, it was fabulous. And little did my sister know that when she used to go out to work at the bank on Hulders Road, I used to go into her bedroom and go through her music collection, trying to find out what was that song she was playing that last night. She'd be upstairs playing music, I'd be downstairs watching the telly, but the occasional song would, I think, oh my God, I love that song, what is it? So the next day I would literally go through her albums, putting the song on, putting songs on, go through each one, trying to determine, is that the song I was listening to? Honestly, I'd spend ages doing that, just to find that one song, but she didn't know that. If she knew I was prying through her collection, I don't know if she'd be really upset. Not because I'd been going through her records, but the fact that I'm liking the music she liked. The idea was I'm not supposed to like her music because she's playing this outrageous music. If she knew a 14-year-old brother was liking that, I don't think she'd have liked that at all. So I kept it to myself. So at the time of going to the Silhouette Club, there were a number of other clubs I used to go to. In particular, Spiders nightclub. That was another alternative club. Very similar to the Silhouette Club in terms of the music output. The people it would attract, again, it would attract alternatives. The goths, the punks, the rockabillys, the psychobillies, the new romantics, all these different tribes. It was a lot bigger than the Silhouette Club. It wasn't a gay club, though gay people used to go there, because the same people who used to go to the Silhouette Club also used to go to the Spiders. It was what you did, you just alternated, because they were very similar in atmosphere. There was no very little trouble at Spiders as well. Again, they had a door policy, no townies, blah blah blah. So those two places were very similar in essence. But the whole night wasn't just about ending up at these nightclubs. It was the getting there as well. For instance, on a Saturday night, which was the main night for most people to go out, you'd start off by getting ready at about 6 o'clock in your bedroom. You'd be doing your hair, spraying it. You'd have your favourite music on. Mine was the Cramps, and I start dressing up. I put on a certain shirt or jacket and don't like that. I was doing what hundreds of other people were doing at the same time, standing in front of a mirror, swapping clothes, playing music, thinking, I've got to look the part, I've got to feel the part. And it was such fun. For me, that was the beginning of the night. Quite possibly the best part of the night. It bookended by the end of the night, of course, when you go to a club, but these two bookends ending up at a club and getting ready to go out to a club. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And I mean, that would make a good book in itself, just hearing what people have got to say, what music they listen to, what ritual they practiced as they were getting ready, if any rituals, or what was the habits of getting ready, because that's such an essential part of being young and going out, getting everything right. You've got to be in the right mood. So we'd get ready, or I'd get ready, and I knew lots of other people doing it at the same time, and then I think I was still living in East Hull at this point, and I'd meet up at the Queen's in town. There's a pub called the Queen's on George Street. It's right opposite. It's opposite the car park where there's a big box building now, an awful building. The Queen's was a lovely, very old pub, very decorative on the outside, and we'd meet in there. Lots of other people, like-minded people, would meet there, and it's a place to check out people. You'd meet your friends, but you'd also be seeing all these other people dressed up who'd done exactly what I've been doing an hour before getting ready, conscious, terribly conscious of what they look like, because you are at that age, and that was so exciting, because this was the sort of first square on the board of that game of going out and seeing if you could cop off with anybody. And it's just the first move. It's like you start checking out people, like, oh yeah, quite like that person. So we'd start off there, we'd go to the Queen's, meet up, and then we'd gravitate towards the Old English Gentleman was a favourite of ours. It's I can't remember the name of the road it's on. Beautiful old pub, it's been there forever. Lots of pictures on the walls of actors and actresses who've been on the theatre. Lots of theatre people go to that pub after they've performed. So that was a really, really essential pub on our list, our itinerary. And we'd see other punks and goths and whatnot doing the same thing. We'd say hello, get chatting, and then we'd eventually move on to the Spring Bank. If we're going to the Silhouette, we'd move on to the Spring Bank. If we're going to Spiders, we'd move on from the Old English Gentleman to a pub called the Ship Inn. It was a really old pub. It was like old blokes used to go there. It wasn't your sort of pub where alternatives used to go, but we found it and we made it our sort of place to go. And one or two of the people had discovered it as well. It's not the sort of pub you expect alternatives to go to, but it was quite close to Spiders. So that's where we'd go if we're heading to Spiders. The old Ship Inn, I think they call it. Is it Cleveland Street? But if we went to the Silhouette Club, we'd go down a different route. We'd go down to the Spring Street Tavern, which is next to the Silhouette Club. And this is a really laid back place where once upon a time we went in there. My mate lit up at the bar. As he put his drink down on the bar, he just started rolling up a joint and smoking it at the bar. And I thought, are you mad? This is mental. What are you doing? And he was so laid back, he just couldn't give a damn about anything. I said, okay, fair enough. I had nothing against people smoking gear at all. I mean, I used to smoke a little bit, not much, didn't really like it. It was just the fact that, do you know where you are? Do you know where you... We just couldn't care less. And so we'd go there, we'd go to the Spring Street Tavern, and there were lots of other Silhouette people going in there as well. That was a place to hang out. It was quite a cool place. Quite run down, if I remember back then. Quite sleazy, but I sort of like that. And then sometimes we'd go up to the Polar Bear at the top of Springbank. Again, it's where lots of people were coming from the other direction, Springbank West, gravitating towards the Silhouette Club. So they'd be there, and then we'd see them as well. And when you're seeing that many people all dressed up, and then you know they're all going to the same place, it sort of builds the mood and the atmosphere. Do you know what I mean? It's very carnivalesque because people have drunk a bit more and they're a bit louder, and bit more fanciful and theatrical and all this, and it's great. It really builds up a momentum, and so that was generally the route we used to take. We didn't have that many pubs. I tried to avoid the town pubs. When I started dressing alternatively, I didn't go into the town clubs, because I did go into the Hull Cheese once when I had red hair and leather trousers, and I stood on a bloke's foot at the bar when I was at the bar, and I turned around to apologise, and he headbutted me, and I ended up on the floor. And when I looked up, a big fight had started. It was like a cowboy scene where chairs were being thrown, because this bloke who'd headbutted me didn't realise I was with about 15 other people. So I stayed on the floor. I just watched it. I thought, oh my God, this is mental. But whether that was to do with the fact that I had red hair, and this bloke, when I turned around to say sorry, he just thought I'm an easy target. Don't know. But that's what it was like on a Saturday night. Saturday night in Hull in the 80s. It was one of the most violent cities at the weekend in England, statistically. And a number of times, I got aggro just because of the way I dressed. But I didn't mind that, because I knew it was part of it. You just had to live with that. And this takes me back to what I said earlier about the Silhouette Club. If you aligned with gay people about their views, you were a target, a legitimate target for the authorities, or for people in general, members of the public who were prejudiced against gay people. And 3 times when I left Silhouette Club with my friend, we left at the end of the night, I got jumped on 3 times, physically ended up in a fight with three times, because the people who attacked us thought we were gay. So this is what I mean. This is the kind of crap you had to put through. You had to go through. And it'd be interesting to hear how gay people now in Hull or whatever city, if they have an idea what it was like for people, gay people mainly, and also those who dressed alternatively. If you're a punk, you had a mad hair or whatever coloured hair or whatever, you were a target. You immediately became a target. So I'm not sure how they could ever understand what it was like. Maybe they do. It'd be quite interesting to hear people's opinions about, especially if you're gay now. Do you realise what gay people had to go through, the crap they had to endure and face? It would be quite fascinating to hear their opinion, because I'm sure, life seems a lot better for gay people. It can't be any worse than what it was then. But I know gay people now, but I never go into conversations about what's it like to be gay now compared to, I never do that, because they're just friends, and it doesn't seem like an issue. Nobody cares anymore. So I wouldn't bring that up. I wouldn't suddenly say, well, do you realise in the 80s it was like this for gay? Well, no, you don't need to do that, because this is why I said it seems better. There isn't the need to say that to somebody, my friend. I don't need to say that, But I'm sure there are just idiots out there, equal number of idiots, but they may not be so vocal or physical. But Hull was a very working class town. Really working class. I remember. And so you were putting yourself at risk just by dyeing your hair. But if you dyed your hair, you were gay, you were on the dole, you'd had it. That was a full house. Because people on the dole were also targeted by the Thatcher government as scroungers. They made an issue of people on the dole. You were persona non grata again, along with gay people. But if you expressed allegiance to all of those 3 things, well, basically it had it.
Were you on the dole?
Yeah, I was for about 4 or 5 years. From about 18 to, I started out college at 21, not full time, but from, I'd say 18 to about 23 until I started my foundation course full time. I was on the dole, on and off. I was working on the side. Oops. and on and off I got the occasional job, but by and large I was on the dole for about 5 years. I don't think I can blame that down to government. I think I wasn't very confident. I didn't know what to do with my life. And just by chance one day, I was with my friends and I'd passed the art college. It was one afternoon, it was about 1985. And I passed the art college, Queen's Gardens. It's got the big glass front. And do you know what? I said goodbye to my mates one afternoon, sunny afternoon. I started walking off on my own. And I passed the glass building. And I stopped. And I looked inside it at the people in there busying themselves away, you know. And I had this really weird sort of epiphanic moment again. I just thought, I'm going to do that one day. I'm going to be one of them. And do you know what I did the next day? I signed up. I signed up to do an O-level night class. I thought, I've got to start somewhere. So I did that. And then I went on to study for an A-level art. And then I applied to do a full-time foundation course, which I did in Hull as well. This was in, I think it was successive years. So that was full-time. And it was great in full-time, so I wasn't on the dole. I was no longer, you know, a target, a government target. So I signed up for this foundation course. And you know what? For the first time in my life, I discovered that I was good at something. Because I got a first in my foundation. I got a distinction. Never happened to me before, okay? I never, ever, ever felt I was good at anything. And the feeling of discovering that I was actually good at this, it was just sensational. And because it's awful feeling like you can't contribute to life, just you're worthless to some degree. So I found I was good at something. And so then I applied to do a degree. I was going to leave Hull. I went looking all over the place, Liverpool, Derby, etc. But my foundation course tutors said they'd like me to stay, and because I was a mature student, I'd already got a flat. Why waste a year moving somewhere, getting used to it, going out, getting pissed, and not really focus on your work? I thought you got a good point there. So I decided to stay, and I did my degree in the Hull Art College, and it was fantastic. I've never worked so hard in my life from that foundation course to the end of the degree. I slogged my guts off getting as much out of it. I squeezed that sponge dry. I got everything I could out of it. And in a fine art course, I don't know if you know, but it's all self-motivated. You come up with your own projects and you have to execute them, and then you get them assessed by the tutors. You have to do that all the way through. You have to be self-motivated. I never once lost a moment not being able to come up with an idea. I just got lucky. I hit this. It must have been my age, because if I had done this at 19 rather than 24, 23, whatever it was, I'm not sure I would have been as motivated or had the experiences that I had as a mature student. Because some people on my course struggled. They couldn't get on with it. They wanted guidance. And I thought, well, that might have been me had I been younger. So that's where my art side of it comes from. And it all became by chance. That one day, walking past the art college, and there must have been something in me, because I did art at school, but I never thought I'd end up doing it for the rest of my life. I don't know whether that was something to do with the magic mushrooms I've been taking out the year, but I honestly don't know whether something went pop in my head. But I know there was something in me that I was always open to new experiences, and I wanted to experience things that weren't conventional. So maybe that was just it. I didn't want a conventional career, because my dad was a trawlerman. He wanted me to become a coalman when I was younger. He had his, not just me, my two brothers as well. My dad had written on the back of his coal wagon, Keith Rowe and Sons. This was when I was about 13, 14, and I said to him one day, I said, what's all that about? And Sons said, I don't want to do that. I said to him, and he said, well, it's a good business. And it was before the gas took over. But he was only thinking the best for us. But I thought, I'm not doing that. No chance. Nah, not for me. And I knew as I started on my art career, my dad didn't get it. He didn't get it. He didn't get what I was doing because it wasn't a traditional working class thing to do. I was the first person ever in our family to go to art college or do a degree. And I don't think he knew what to do with that for a long time. He never really talked about it. We never went anywhere near it. When we had our conversations on the phone when I'd moved away, we never went over any of that stuff. He didn't get it. Which was okay. I didn't mind that because... And then one day back in 2017, I was commissioned by the Hull City of Culture to create a installation on Whitefriar Gate, and this installation comprised lots of fake factual advertisements in the windows that related to the history of Hull. It was a humorous thing. I created hundreds of fake, sort of mixture of fake and factual advertisements, and I put them in the window of the shop. It was called Amuse Agents. It was down Whitefriar Gate, and I went under a different name, Preston Likely. And this shop got ridiculous amount of coverage. And in fact, it was only meant to be there for 2 weeks. But Martin Green, who was the head of the City of Culture, he said, I want your shop to remain open for 6 months. I was so touched by that. And one day, my dad, I don't think in his life he'd ever given me he'd never said to me that he was proud of anything I'd ever done. And then one day, in 2017, my dad happened to go and see my installation with his wife, Trish. And he rang up, out of the blue. I was just sitting here watching the telly, and he said, I'm outside your installation, he says. I went, oh yeah. He said, there's a crowd of people here. He goes, I've been telling them you're my son. And I was really touched. I thought, my God, he didn't need to say any more than that. He's actually proud of something I did. And that really touched me. That I thought, oh my God, he's never expressed any form of sort of pride. And he said that, and I thought, oh my God. I don't think he could say it in any other way. He couldn't say to me, oh, what you've done's brilliant. But all he needed to say was, oh, I'm outside your installation and I've been telling everybody you're my son. He didn't need to say it in any other way. Does that make sense? And that's the only time he'd ever expressed, I think it was the only time. And after that, shortly before he died, we had a conversation, and he said, you've done your own thing, haven't you, in life? And I went, yeah. And he goes, good for you. Oh my God. After all those years of not broaching what I'd done, I think he'd finally got it that, shit, he's doing something that he likes and other people like. And so because other people liked it, what I was doing, I think that gave him also a sort of claim on what I was doing, that it was legit. Other people had liked it. I wasn't just doing stuff for my own sake. And so anyway, I've digressed a bit there. But that's my art link. And since my degree, I've done hundreds of jobs. I've worked on farms. I've been a postman. I sort of lost my way after my degree. There were no signposts. I just left the college. And quite literally, and I mean this literally, 2 weeks after I'd finished my degree in 1993, I decided to leave Hull. And this is what I did. I gave up my flat. I packed a rucksack with a diary, a camera, pair of trousers, jeans, t-shirt, and I left Hull. I just left. I thought I'll go away for 6 months, see what happens. And so I went with a friend and we went hitchhiking to France. And I've never come back since. I've never moved back. I was only meant to go away for 6 months. I never returned. And it seems a bit mad now that I did that with a rucksack. I had £300 in my bank account that I'd saved doing a cleaning job. I used to clean at the Bull pub on Beverley Road at the weekends in my last year at college, because I knew I was going to leave at some point in Hull, but not the way I did it. So I saved every penny from that cleaning job. It was at a weekend, so I'd be going to Spiders or Silhouette. No, it wouldn't be Silhouette then. That was finished by then. The Silhouette. I'd go to Spiders. I'd get home at 2 o'clock from Spiders, having drunk loads. I'd get up at 5 o'clock to clean the pub. I was drunk when I was cleaning the pub. Seriously. But I saved all the money, and that was the money I took away with me to leave Hull. And when I returned from France hitchhiking, I came back to England and I got a job on a hop picking farm. And this is no word of a lie, when I got that job on the hop picking farm, because you get paid daily, the day before I got paid I had 1 penny left in the whole world. So I swear, I flicked it up in the air and I said to my mate who I was with in the hop fields, walking towards the hop picking huts where we were going to stay, I said, that's the last penny I've got in the world. And he goes, you what? He goes, I always keep £1,000 in the bank. I thought, £1,000 like a fortune then. It's like, oh my God, you're joking. And he was like, what, you're joking? You've only got a penny? And I said, you've got 1,000. He's like, whoa, these worlds colliding. This is a person who thinks about his future. This is a person who only thinks about the present. So I think that told me quite a lot about myself then, that I was really living in the moment. And I've never really planned anything, and that's the truth. I've never really planned. And that's quite exciting. Quite like that. Well, not long-term plans.
And but you are also the creator of the Silhouette Club, A Queer Sort of Paradise book. Could you talk to us about how you came to revisit your, I was going to say misspent, but it feels like well-spent youth?
Yeah. How did I come to create the Silhouette Club, or my Silhouette Club book? Well, it came on the back of having created a book about Spiders nightclub. And I'll briefly explain why I decided to create the Spiders Club, because it's important that led to this book. The Spiders book came one day because I'd had my Spiders book negatives. Let's just say that in the 80s I took lots and lots of black and white pictures in Spiders, and I never published them. I kept them in my negative files for years in my cupboard. And then one day in 2016, George Norris contacted me and said, Andy, somebody said you took loads of pictures at Spiders. I went, yeah, that's right. He said, can I have a few for my exhibition? And I went, oh, I was like, can't be bothered to digitise them. I said, I'll see George. And I didn't. I couldn't be bothered to digitalise them. I couldn't be bothered because I was so far away from that experience of the 80s and 90s at Spiders that I felt as I couldn't connect. It didn't mean anything to me, honestly. And then a week later, a former Spiders DJ contacted me as well and said, I'm starting a new nightclub at a pub playing all Spiders music. And he goes, can you send me 1 or 2 images of your pictures that you took? And he knew I'd taken pictures because he was going out with the girl I used to go out with. She knew I'd taken pictures. Anyway, I said, okay, Chris, I'll do this if it gets you off my back. So I went into my cupboard where I kept all my negatives, got them out. I thought I'll digitalise 6 pictures. And I started off. I digitalised half a dozen. And do you know what? After I'd done 6, I thought, I'm loving this. Oh my God, I'm seeing people in these negs I've not seen for years. I'm thinking, who's that person? I remember that person. Oh my God, I spent the next 2 days, I digitalised about 100 pictures. Oh. And then at the end of it, I just thought, right, I'm done with that. I'm just going to put them on Facebook group. The group as Facebook, I don't think there was a group page then. I just put them on Facebook. And I said to everybody, whoever wants these pictures, have them. I left it. I thought, I'm done with it. spiders is done and dusted. It's years ago. It doesn't mean anything. Even though I enjoyed the experience of going through all these eggs. Anyway, the next day, the Oxford Mail, the Hull Daily Mail gets in touch. It's seen these pictures. And I went onto his Facebook. Oh my God. This collection, this album that I'd put up there, had been retweeted or shared. It had been shared hundreds and hundreds of times. And then this woman got in touch with me from the Hull Daily Mail, says, can we do an interview? And it was like, what have I done? And then my emails, oh my God, emails, influx of emails. Because what people do is they started putting names to faces and tagging them in the images.
Mm-hmm.
There were people all around the world who'd been tagged. New Zealand, America, Australia, Europe, mainland Europe, all in these images. And then they're getting in touch with me. And there's one girl said, I was out to lunch today. She emailed me, said I was out to lunch with a girl I haven't seen for a friend who I hadn't been out seen for 30 years because of your pictures on Facebook. And I'm like, what? I was just honestly blown away by what had happened. This was me really reluctant the week before with George Norris, to the point where I thought, oh wow, this is great. It was really exciting. I thought, I didn't mean this is unintended consequences. This is the most exciting thing that can happen when it's unintended consequences, in my opinion, because it's not contrived. It's happening naturally, organically. Anyway, it went from madness to madness. You know, ID magazine got in touch and ran a story, and so many other people. And in the end, a friend said to me, why don't you make a book out of your pictures? I went, I got time for it. Full-time job, child to bring up. I said, anyway, I'll be able to produce a book if I get other people to write the book or create the book. And so that's what I did. Got people to send me anecdotes about their experiences, etc. And the result was the Spiders book. My pictures, by and large, the black and white ones, and anecdotes. And that book went down brilliantly. And so on the back of that book, somebody said, and I've been thinking this, why don't you create a book about the Silhouette Club? It was a friend of mine who used to go there years ago, a woman called Sharon, regular. And she said, why don't you create a book? And I was only an hour for years, after the Spiders book. And then COVID came along, and I started thinking about it more and more. I had more time to go through all my Silhouette Club pictures. So I went through all my slides, negatives, started digitalising them, and I put it off again. I thought COVID is a great chance to do it, but I put it off for 3 more years. And one night, I'd got this book. This book came through the post. It was February 2023. I ordered this book. Sorry. It's the Alec Gill Hessel Road Photo Archive. And I sat there one February night. I went through this and I loved it. I thought, this is fantastic. Brilliant pictures, excellent stories, beautifully presented. I put that book down about 10 o'clock after I'd read it in the evening. And I went over to my computer and I just put on the Silhouette Facebook group page, I'm going to create a book about the Silhouette Club. That was it. And I did that to commit to it. I put something out there so that I couldn't retreat and I couldn't go back. And it all just happened within about 6 months. I started getting anecdotes. And at first I didn't think I would be able to find the people. Remember back in 2023, that's 33 years since the club had closed. I just thought nobody's going to be interested in stories about the Silhouette Club. It's too long ago. Maybe they had the same feelings I did about the Spiders Club. People had just moved away from that. It was their youth. Why would they want to connect? But it was, once you can, it's one thing messaging people saying, will you send me a story, because they're just words on a page. You have to do something to stoke their interest, you know what I mean? So I think I'd sent a picture along, a memory of the place, maybe just to try and get their interest fired up. And I was amazed that people wanted to do it. And I was tracking people down who I never thought I would ever find, like the owner of the club, Ray Dibner. Somebody said he was dead. And I've tracked him down, and I managed to have an hour and a half conversation with him on the telephone. And I just thought that was the first one I'd done, the first story with Ray, who was the owner. And my God, I was so thrilled with that it just gave me momentum. And I thought, if I can track him down, he's supposed to be dead. I'm talking to ghosts here. I can track anybody down.
Can you tell us what he might have said?
Oh, Ray was fantastic. He told me things. He told me how difficult it was to begin with to establish an official gay nightclub in Hull. Because back in the 70s, he had an evening in midweek. It was a gay disco, roller disco, at the Ballyhigh. It's where the Ballyhigh Club was, on George Street. He used to hire this space. It was where a club was on a Saturday called Ballyhigh. In the week, he used to hire this same space, and it was where gay people used to go. It wasn't officially gay because it wouldn't have happened, but gay people knew to go there. They knew of a place where they could go, and so this ran for a few years. Brilliant. And then it got closed down. For one reason or another, and then him and his partner Les, they just came with an idea. Let's start a club. It's important that they have there's a community, a place to go for the gay community. There were one or two pubs, not official, where gay people used to go, but nothing was ever official. It was all done sort of not a subversive thing. It's more of it's like codes. People use codes to say, let's go there, let's meet there, so there were places gay people used to know where to meet, to congregate, but they're never official because it just wouldn't have been allowed at that juncture in time. But when he suggested to the council that he wanted to open up a gay club, an official one, he faced so much opposition. Not only from the council, but it's from other club owners. Club owners sort of form a cartel where they don't want other clubs sort of sharing a bit of the pie, so to speak. They keep it to themselves. And especially if it's a gay club. No. So he faced lots of opposition because it had never been done in Hull. But eventually, when he found the space for the original club, Springbank, it was a casino at the time. And casinos are quite notorious anyway. They stay open late, they attract all sorts of strange clientele, creatures of the night. It seemed quite fitting that it should be turned into a club for you. Similar sorts of people who like to live on the fringes, so to speak. And he got it. He got past in the end, thank God. And the other stuff he told me about it's just horrible things. It's like when he was filling in an application form for the club, he got broached by the council and the police. They peppered him with questions, and one of them was, it's in the book where he mentions licentious dancing. This was a police term, where if gay people were dancing too close, that was called licentious dancing. It was not legal, and it wasn't permitted in nightclubs. So they asked him about these things, and it was like, how do you answer? What distance are they going to be? There was some sort of official distance where, if you encroached on that standard distance, you were deemed to be licentious dancing. It's just madness. It's just silly. But anyway, he faced all these hoops and hurdles, And he obviously stuck at it. I mean, hats off to him, because nothing would have happened without him and his partner Les, pushing and pushing and pushing and believing in themselves. And he also mentioned things like the police going to the club. They'd send a person incognito to the club to check it out, see what was going on. And so they were under surveillance regularly, and you really can't quite believe it, having to put up with that, as well as run a club with all the other issues that go with it. You're spied on and not trusted, and but it was a great conversation. And he said that he had hundreds and hundreds of photographs of the club, that his partner at the time, I think his partner was called Andrew, he's not his business partner, his partner is his lover. It's called Andrew, took lots and lots of pictures. And Ray said to me, I've got all these pictures. And during the telephone conversation, I said, can I be privy to those pictures? Can I come down and see you and photograph them and whatnot and copy them? And he said yes. He was so open on the phone about anything I could ask him. He was brilliant. And then after that conversation ended, I could never ever get back in touch with him again, ever. I tried. I asked friends to go around there, knock on his door, can we get hold of these pictures? I haven't got anywhere. Don't know what happened. But I got him. I caught him at that juncture in time where he was willing. Maybe he just didn't want to do it anymore, didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to give any more information out or images. Fair dues. But I managed to get that story from him because it's quite essential, because he talks about the genesis of his interest in creating these establishments for gay people. It is in the book, and it's quite interesting. And we have everything to thank him to thank, really. And other people, a number of famous people went to the club. Lots of creative people came out of this scene. You had playwrights such as John Godber, you had Roland Gifford, the Fine Young Cannibals, you had the House Martins going there, you had Sean McAllister, who's an international filmmaker, you have, I don't know, a number of artists in there. And it, for such a small club, lots and lots of people became quite well known and famous. And Sean Pepper writes a story in my book, who was friends with Roland Giff, really, really close friends. He had a theory about this, that why so many people went on to do good things, creative things, positive things, is because the club was so small. So it was so tightly packed that you were rubbing shoulders with people, and it almost forced you to have conversations with people and share ideas. So it became this big melting pot of creativity. And that's quite nice to think of it as a melting pot, as that metaphor, producing all these, they were probably already great minds, but enhancing their self-belief and ideas. And this is what I mean about these sort of places. They're essential. Like-minded people coming together and colliding and swapping stories and notions and all this. It's magical. You can't put a price on it. But then slowly I got these anecdotes together. I did it in a similar way as the Spiders book, where it was based on anecdotes, because I want the book to be one big story of other people's stories. I didn't want too much of my viewpoint, or I wanted it to be about other people, because that's what the club was. So it's not, I put the thing together, that's really all I can claim, because it's everybody, we're all in it together, it's a collective thing. I can't do it without other people, and it wouldn't happen without me. And I feel really pleased that, I also feel surprised that if I took myself back now to the 80s, let's say especially the Silhouette Club, I'm standing there as this very sort of willowy youth. I would never, if somebody walked to me that night and said, back in 1984, 85, said, you're going to be responsible for creating this book about the Silhouette Club, and it's going to be a historical piece, I would have just laughed. it wouldn't have meant anything. I wouldn't have had the wherewithal to do it. I wouldn't have had the imagination to do it, or the self-belief. But I quite like the fact that it fell on my shoulders to do it, and people were asking me to do it. And I felt as though, having done the Spiders one, I was some sort of authority. And that felt weird, because I've never been an authority figure. I've never really led anybody. I've always been a very private sort of operator, if you know what I mean. I'm not really a group person or a team player. I can be part of a team. But by and large, I'm very self-motivated, and I can do lots of things on my own, as you've gathered. But to be asked to do this, to take the responsibility, because it's easy to fuck these things up, pardon my Latin, but it's really easy to make a right balls of it, and then you're remembered as being a twit, who doesn't do your job properly, or doesn't do the research. But I must admit, I loved researching this book. Mm-hmm. Creating the Silhouette book was far more satisfying, because it has the political edge to it, and it did take me off on these tangents where I went into the political side, and it distracted me a bit. Reading people's accounts and mentioning Thatcher and other names and other policies and laws and rules. I did get somewhat distracted, but it just was so. The stories are better because there's a lot of tension. I mean, there's one lad's story in there where his dad was a police inspector, and they had this battle going on, where his dad had told him, you mustn't go to the Silhouette Club, you mustn't go to the Elder Grey pub where the prostitutes hung out, you mustn't go to the Victoria Coffee Bar, another place where prostitutes used to hang out, after hours club. All very, they were quite decadent, some of them, but quite exciting, really. So his dad, who's a police inspector, telling him not to go to these places, and he's having to go against what his dad, suggested he shouldn't do. I mean, that must have been. I wish I'd explored his story more, because I thought it was great, and I did have to redact some. We put more in there, and then later on he came back to me and said, "Look, for the sake of my relationship with my dad, can you remove this?" And it was interesting stuff, and I won't repeat it, but. It was very interesting. Still to this day, that affects him. That story would affect his dad from 30, 40 years ago. It's still pertinent in his life now. If I'd have left that in there, that might have caused friction. So that was interesting. Oh my God, this is still powerful stuff, isn't it? His dad obviously hasn't moved on. He's still probably the same old commander-in-chief, that sort of mentality, and you got to do as I say. But some of the stories are very moving. And I learned a lot. I learned a hell of a lot of what gay people had to go through. Because when we used to go to the club, we didn't spend our time at the club going, what's it like to be gay? What's the shit you have to put up with? Tell me all about it. I never did that. That wasn't my business. If people wanted to talk to me about it, fair dues. But I went there for mainly fun and enjoy it with everybody else. But now, all these years on, and it's still powerful, their memories and feelings and thoughts resonate. This is why to me it's more of a historical book than anything else, because hopefully we won't ever have to go through these times again. But also the book is also a warning against how tectonic plates can shift easily. And also another thing, just one more thing about it, is that if a young person reads this who feels that they're outsiders, I don't just mean a gay person, it could be just an alternative, and they pick this up and they read it and go, wow, so it's always been like this, then to me that would have been worth producing this book. That alone, if somebody, young person right now, can feel better that there are other people out there, always have been, always will be, that is worth its weight in gold. That, it's just priceless. And I like to think somebody's thought like that. I really do. Because these things are not about making money. It's just a love of doing it. But the Spiders book makes money. It keeps on selling. But I do it primarily, and it's a lot of effort. and anybody else who's creative, it's shitloads of time doing this stuff. And you never know, it might just fall flat on its ass, the whole thing. But I don't really care. It's like lobbing pebbles into a pond. Those ripples, they can go far and wide and create all sorts of good benefits for people.
Do you think it would have been possible without the internet? I'm suddenly struck by the Facebook groups and the connections that were. I mean, George Norris is good, but he's not that good. Do you know what I mean? In knowing people, is there something about that community that can sit on there that, in the 90s it wouldn't have been possible to do it in the same way?
No, it's a good question. No, it wouldn't have been possible to do it. It would have been a nightmare to do it. Everything has changed because of the digitalisation of imagery, of the internet. The internet makes it, well, a million times easier to do this sort of thing because you can be instantly connected and track people down. So the answer is, it would be impossible to do it without the internet. Well, not impossible, but it would take you 10 times the time. It would be expensive. You would probably lose interest. With the internet, it keeps you going because you keep getting feedback. So I can send emails out saying, do you want to be part of this book? Do you want to... And
people tag each other in.
Yeah.
They do a lot of the groundwork for you.
Oh.
But also, I'm also struck by how few photographs we took. Like you've managed to pull together a book that's full of photographs at a time when we didn't really take photographs. Or most of us didn't.
Yeah.
Some people did.
Great point, Kate. A few people took those Kodak Instamatics. Paul Weems was a real archivist of the Silhouette Club. He's taken lots, and many of these pictures are his. A few others took pictures.
Gary
took some. Yeah, Gary did. Gary took a few, and a number of other people. And thank God they did. I took a few. I used to take my big 35mm camera, but I didn't take it so often to the Silhouette. I felt that the Silhouette didn't have the same space as Spiders. It didn't feel the right place to go. Take a big whopping great camera. But you're right, and the pictures that remain, they're like hen's teeth when you get hold of them, and that's the beauty. And also, I love the fact that the quality is not so good because they're taken on the old Kodak Instamatics, and I love that because it tells you of the time. It tells you that there weren't that many pictures around, and the quality is not that good, and they become really precious. And that's what's the beauty of the book. There are so many images that you think at first that I did worry about that at first. So I knew I didn't have enough images to create a book as I did with the Spiders one. I had hundreds of spiders, but with this one I didn't have that many. I had a couple of dozen, whatever. But then these pictures started pouring in, and they were very poor, some of them. I had to really work hard to make them, to lift the quality. That was a lot of effort doing that. So the way people take pictures of their own pictures, will take a picture using their phone, so there's light coming across it. I have to deal with those things. But no, it was great. Every time I received a new picture, oh wow, I used to dance on the tabletop. And I actually met up, when I was doing the book, putting it together, I met up with two people. I met up with John. He used to run the shop Transvaal in Hull. He was a big player, John. He was a big shop owner. He ran the Transvaal. It was an alternative shop in the 80s. It's for punks. And then he sold that. That was on Springbank, the Transvaal. And he sold that and opened up the one on, my mind's going, my memory's going, King Edward Street. It was The End. The End was the shop. Another alternative shop, but it was less about punk. It was more London influenced, quite varied shop, brilliant shop. That's where I got my brothel creepers from. But John was a big player on the scene. He got people people would come into his shop at the end, and he'd be playing music all the time. And the customers would say, "What song's this?" And John would tell them. He said, "Oh, go to the Silhouette Club, you'll hear similar music." So John was always pushing the Silhouette Club. And I interviewed him. I went down to see him. I met him in the park, Pearson Park, and he brought all these pictures with him. And he brought the picture of Roland Gift, which had never been published before. I was so pleased with that, because there's hardly any pictures of Roland Gift at the club. And he produced these 2 pictures. So I copied them. And it was nice. We sat there for about 2 hours drinking tea and chatting, and it's fantastic. And I'm just transcribing this, I'm writing it down and whatever, and using it, and then I had to write it all out from the recording and then send it to him. Then he'd amend it, say, "Don't want that to be in it, too controversial." People forget they've been recorded, so they start waffling on, and I start writing it down. And when you see it written down, it's like, "Oh, did I really say that? Remove that." Okay, so that was a bit tricky, but I did the same with Roland Gift. Roland gave me a 45-minute interview, which was fantastic of him. Really appreciated that. And again, he told me loads of stuff that I couldn't put in the book. When he first moved to Hull as a black man, shitty-faced, again a minority, same old story. So I managed to use his stuff, Roland's, and I interviewed the first ever, I think it's the bass guitarist out of the Housemartins, Ted Key. Ted and I, we met up in a cafe, and we did a similar thing. We sat there for a couple of hours, we chatted, and again he told me lots of personal stuff that I can't repeat in this book. He did talk a lot. I don't know why he told me certain stuff about the split, but it's a weird thing.
Maybe it was the trust of
space. Yeah, because I went to the same club, sort of one of which. Yeah, I get that. He did trust me, obviously. But something really weird happened after we'd stopped talking. He mentioned the fact that after he split from the Housemartins, he couldn't listen to any of the music ever again. He did his head in because he missed out on the fame, even though it was on the first album. He's credited with 3 songs. London Nil Hull 4 is on that. But he told me that he couldn't ever listen to their music. It freaked him out, sent him into a depression, whatever. And then as we said goodbye in the town centre, I jumped out of his car. I swear about 30 seconds later, as I'm walking through the Paragon Arcade, Happy Hour comes on by the Housemartins, and I thought, oh my God, if Ted Key had been here now, he'd have freaked out. In a way, I wish he'd been with me, because I'd love to have seen his reaction. I couldn't believe that. I thought it was really poetic.
Synchronicity.
It was brilliant, because I've not heard that song played in a public space for 30 odd years, and there it is. But the experience of doing it as well is lovely, because it's not only something you do sitting at a desk. I have to go out, I have to detect, I have to scratch around and look, or scrabble around and find information. So it's a real lot of detective work, and it's just picking up on bits and pieces what people have said, and oh, I know a person, they'll give you some information, you get in touch with that person. Oh, it's not me. Oh, it could be this person. All right. So you go on these wild goose chases, but it's such a great experience. It's a cliche, but it's a real journey, and I've learned so much from it, and I feel so pleased. And Gary's forever so grateful how it's really changed his life again. This whole thing, he's had a lot of attention because of this book, and he's so great about it and gracious and all this. And he came to the book signing in October 2023. There's quite a lot of people there, ex-Sil members, and I launched it. I spent an hour and odd on the stage talking about it, and then I got people involved, and I specifically got Gary involved because Gary's is the archetypal story of a young and confident gay person discovering himself through this club, a community, of like-minded people. He is that story. He's the story that, for me, is the book, really. Is the foundations of the book. Is people discovering themselves. And I got him to speak at the book launch. You know, he stood up and did a really good speech. And a number of other people too. They got involved, and it was a great night of hearing these other stories that are not in my book. And I thought, where were you when I was sending out emails? Why didn't you send me your story? And there's one really amazing story of a girl there. I've never seen her before or since. There's a black girl, a woman, who I gave her the mic, and she started talking about a very similar story to Gary's. She's a black woman going to the Silhouette, meets like-minded people, and she's telling this story, and she's in tears. It is incredible. It was so moving. And afterwards I got chatting. She said she was going to create a play, a stage play about the Silhouette Club. And I said, please get in touch with me. I gave her my email. I've not heard from her. But her emotional input that night was just like nothing else. She was absolutely in tears about how it changed her life. Oh, why did I get that story? But anyway, so this is the power of these types of clubs, specifically Silhouette Club, because it's the only gay club I ever frequently went to. And it's a nice story. It's a nice story of how something that once upon a time when Les and Ray were trying to establish, there was resistance. Yet the goodness, the positivity that came out of it is immeasurable. You can't weigh it up. You can't weigh up the benefits that club had on a wider society and social cohesion. And it just tells me that the thickest and most narrow-minded people are often in control of places, governments, councils. The wrong sort of people are nearly always chosen to be in the most senior positions, and it's depressing, because what would have happened if that hadn't have happened? Would somebody else have come along and created a club? I don't know. But it is a mad story, because it was a very working class town, loads of resistance, yet it happened. So it's a real lesson in just keep having a go. You'll come up against forces that really don't like you, and you have to smash away with your metaphorical axe or whatever you've got in your hand and win.
And then there's a final question, I guess, I want to ask you, which is, now you've shared, however long we've been here talking, you've shared this story and spoken it out, and as we speak we often reflect on our lives and think about all of this time. What do you think in reflection on hearing your story up to now?
I think that I wouldn't want it any other way, that I chose the right side and I was on the right side of history. I know it sounds a bit arrogant, but I wouldn't change a thing about it. If anything, I suppose I have regrets that I wasn't more political at the time. I feel that looking back I was a bit hollow-headed, even though I had all these feelings that I liked going to places that were deemed sort of not very nice and immoral, or a place where your parents wouldn't go, or nice people, places with a horrible reputation. I'm glad I did all that. I'm glad I went to those places that I wasn't supposed to go to. I think I did as much as I could within the little brain that I had at the time. to join the right side. And I don't think I had the intellect then. I didn't have the intellect. I don't particularly think I've got it now, but I wasn't confident enough then to speak out. Now, it wasn't as that I couldn't speak out, because believe me, I used to, about things I believed in. I mean, I knew about, I understood. But I wish I'd known a little bit more about the battles that were going on that gay people had to go through. I didn't really know their battles or their feelings. It's just something I just didn't pick up on. I was too young. I was too much into having a good time and taking stuff and trying to get off with the opposite sex. I was too self-indulgent. That's my only regret. Not being a little bit more intellectually aware. But I think part of me is trying to make up for it by doing this subconsciously. I can't say that for definite, but I may be trying to do that, hold on a minute, I wish I'd done this when I was younger. But as I said, you can only do as much as you can do with the tools that you've got and the brain that you've got and the experiences that you've got. And some good can come out of it, even a tiny little bit of good or positivity. And I'm very pleased. Yeah, I'm very pleased with the whole experience at the time of doing it, and I think it's helped me to this very day. All those experiences, because obviously I've mentioned earlier on, I didn't know any gay people when I went to the club, but I managed to go amongst groups of people that I could easily have been afraid of, but I wasn't afraid of them. And I think people have fooled me. They lied to me when I was younger about gay people and people who dress up as punks and all this. They lied to me by saying they were a threat. By going to that club, I learned that there are liars out there. There are big fat liars, and through empirical evidence and experience you have to be able to find out yourself that who's the liars and who's the truth tellers. And if you don't jump into certain tough experiences or take risks, you'll never find out who's telling the truth or not. You know what I mean? You've got to find out yourself, and I think this is one of those experiences, these episodes of finding out things that people have told you are not true, and it's put me in good stead, I think, for the rest of my life. I'm very cautious of what I see or read, and this all stems back from then, really, from that club where all these supposedly awful people were quite the opposite. And so that's probably a big lesson in life, and that's probably what I've got from it, as well as all the laughs and the fun. And this might sound really weird, right? And I'm not showing off or anything. I just think it's comical. And you don't have to include this, but I used to go to Spiders a lot and Silhouette Club a lot. And ironically, I got off with more girls in the Silhouette Club than Spiders. How did that work? That's not, you don't have to put that in, that's just an aside. I just remember laughing at the time. I thought, oh my God, I've got off another girl at Silhouette. How was this? I thought it was supposed to be a gay club. I just thought that was weird at the time. I thought, what is it about Spiders? And do you know what it was in Spiders? Pretense. People didn't want to get their hair, messed with, or their lipstick. That's what it was. Oh, it could have been me as well. It could have been me. I mean, ultimately, but I still think that's part of it. Whereas at Silhouette, I don't think there was that same. Honestly, Spiders, there was a lot of that posing. Lots of posing at Spiders. And I suppose rightly so, because some of the women I fancied, they obviously spent ages in front of the mirror. They didn't want some plonker coming along, touching their hair. But Silhouette Club, I felt that was less posy. Even though there were poses, obviously it's a club for young people, but honestly I got the impression there was less of that. So that's my reasoning. It might have been me at Spiders, I could have been a total wally. Do you know what I mean? You shouldn't blame other people.